thank you for the scientific committee for giving me this opportunity to talk here today. My topic today is sports and heart. This is a topic that has been of interest to both doctors and public of recent for justifiable reasons.
I'm planning to talk on 4 areas: the effects of regular exercise on heart in athletes, the risk of sudden cardiac death during sports, and how we can screen these athletes and whether there are ways we can prevent the sudden death, and what about sports in patients who have been diagnosed as having heart disease. Regular exercise has its effects on the heart. It causes cardiac hypertrophy. It increases the capillarization and increases the coronary blood supply. It increases the stroke volume, reduces the resting heart rate, and also reduces the resting heart rate during submaximal workloads. It improves heart rate recovery rates and increases the cardiac output at maximum workload. It also lowers the blood pressure and increases the plasma blood volume and hemoglobin levels, and increases the capillarization in the muscle cells, skeletal muscles. One of the other important advantages of regular exercise is it reduces the cholesterol, triglycerides, and the LDL, and increases the HDL cholesterol. So it has many beneficial effects on the heart and the peripheral system. But when somebody exercises regularly over a prolonged period of time, there are some permanent changes that take place in the heart. And this is what we call the athlete's heart. It increases the muscle mass, the thickness of the wall, and the volume. And also it alters the electrical activity of the heart in that it reduces the resting heart rate. And it also causes certain functional abnormalities, such as the left ventricular filling. All these put together we call it the athlete's heart. But sometimes the wall thickness increases to such an extent that it confuses us with certain disease conditions. For example, the athlete's heart can have significant hypertrophy to the extent of 13 to 15 millimeter thickness of the wall, which can get into the area or gray area of between the hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. But there are certain changes that there are certain other factors which will help us to distinguish between athlete's heart and hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. For example, if it's an athlete heart, one would see concentric left ventricular hypertrophy, whereas in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, it will be a more focal type. And the left ventricular cavity becomes small in hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, whereas it increases in size in athlete's heart. Bissier ECG changes can be present in both, and abnormal left ventricular filling favors more a diagnosis of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. So would be the family history of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And thickness with deconditioning, if it comes back to normal, that is more in favor of athlete's heart. More sophisticated investigations like MRI and genetic studies also will help to differentiate hypertrophic cardiomyopathy from athlete's heart. It is it is very, very significant that we make this diagnosis correctly, because an athlete with a hypertrophic cardiomyopathy will be disqualified from further athletic activity. Whereas if we diagnose athlete heart, he can still continue to do his sporting activities. They say it is not only hypertrophic cardiomyopathy, but even certain other conditions like dilated cardiomyopathy, arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy, myocarditis, all can fall into this gray area between athlete heart. So what has raised the interest level in sports and heart is the sudden cardiac deaths occurring in athletes, which is causing a lot of emotional changes in the public as well as among the medical profession, because this is happening in otherwise young, healthy individuals. There had been a lot of reports in local newspapers, mainly because there were 3 school children who died in the early part of January in 2013. All these were otherwise healthy children who were taking part in school activities, getting ready to sports meets and things like that, and suddenly collapsed and died. The international media also has its share of events, and it has been repeatedly published in papers, and internets about the sudden deaths of athletes, more famously in the London Marathon and during soccer matches in UK. But is athletic sudden cardiac death a common event? It is not. It is actually a very rare event, and among the high school athletes, it is less than 1 in 100 to 200,000. But it is slightly more common among marathon runners and recreational joggers, mainly because of the age. When we consider recreational joggers, they may be in their 40s and 50s, and therefore more prone to atherosclerotic coronary artery disease. What causes this sudden death? If we have to look into the causes, we have to basically divide them into two groups. People who are above the age of 35, the commonest cause of death is coronary artery disease. But in younger individuals, coronary artery disease is less common, and other causes predominate. Among those, the most common is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Approximately 46% of patients who die of sudden cardiac death in ages less than 35, they have hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. The second commonest cause is an abnormal coronary artery arising from an abnormal sinus, not the normal sinus. More rare ones are the myocarditis, Marfan syndrome, ARVC, arrhythmogenic right ventricular cardiomyopathy, aortic valve stenosis, dilated cardiomyopathy, and rarely mitral valve prolapse. And significantly, some of the channelopathies like long QT syndrome can also contribute. What causes sudden cardiac death in most of these patients is an arrhythmia. It is either a VT or a ventricular fibrillation. And there had been multiple hypotheses. One is that prolonged physical training induces changes in the cardiac structure, such as chamber dilatation, myocyte death, and fibrosis, that can create an arrhythmic substrate, which can predispose to VT and VF. The second is the immediate physiological demands of intense athletics can trigger malignant arrhythmias. The immediate changes can be hemodynamic, autonomic, or electrolyte imbalance. For example, immediately after exercise, there can be arterial vasodilatation, reduced venous return, which can cause a drop in the blood pressure and therefore reduce coronary perfusion. An acute exercise stress can increase the sympathetic activity, can increase the heart rate and the blood pressure, and therefore increase the oxygen demand, thereby precipitating ischemia. At the same time, they can also cause sodium-potassium imbalance and myocardial irritability. So all these can give rise to a ventricular ectopic activity, which can lead to ventricular tachycardia or ventricular fibrillation. So what can we do to reduce sudden cardiac death? There are multiple ways which are suggested, but none of them have proven benefit. One is pre-participation screening. Screen the athletes before participation to see whether they have any underlying heart disease. And secondly, excluding high-risk patients who have been already diagnosed as having heart disease, we will try to prevent them from taking part in sporting activities. Reporting and evaluating prodromal symptoms, and preparing fitness personnel and facilities for cardiovascular emergencies. Anybody who falls suddenly of a cardiac arrest should have facilities to be resuscitated in the grounds or in any event. And recommending prudent exercise program for the general public. There are a lot of arguments whether pre-participation screening is actually valid, because the incidence of sudden death is so remote, so rare, that any preventing strategy will find it difficult to be cost effective. But the public interest is very high. Therefore, we still have a screening program. Who do we screen? When we look at the sporting activities, we can basically divide them into 9 groups based on the isometric and isovolumic degree of exercise. It is the moderate to severe intensity exercise programs or athletic activities which need screening. We don't need to screen somebody who is playing golf. There are different modalities. One is the American Heart Association, which suggests a 12-point screening procedure, basically asking a history to look for any chest pain or angina, syncope, excessive unexplained dyspnea, prior recognition of a heart murmur, and elevated blood pressure. They also look into family history of any significant sudden death and a physical examination to look for blood pressure, murmur, and a radiofemoral delay, and any evidence of Marfan syndrome. The European Society of Cardiology has taken another step further and recommends a routine ECG in all patients. The argument is that by doing an ECG, we will be able to detect most of the hypertrophic cardiomyopathies, which is the commonest cause of death among the young athletes. The European recommendation is based on an Italian study which routinely does ECG screening, and they have found with the ECG, a sudden cardiac death among athletes has reduced significantly. But there are again certain issues because athletes themselves, because of an athlete heart, hypertrophic heart, can have ECG changes which are normal for them. For example, atrial ectopic beats, isolated QRS voltage criteria for left ventricular hypertrophy, J waves, and even ST elevation with early repolarization changes can be normal, which would be alarming for an otherwise normal person. But they also point to abnormalities which increase further investigation or evaluation. These are T wave inversion, long QT interval, short QT, pathological Q waves, left atrial enlargement, right ventricular hypertrophy, left bundle branch block or any other complete heart block, ventricular pre-excitation, that is WPW syndrome, and Brugada syndrome, and so and so. So there is a list of ECG changes which would warrant further assessment before the person is allowed for athletic activity. The pre-participation screening based on a 12-lead electrocardiogram is effective in identifying athletes with potentially lethal cardiovascular diseases, and it does save lives. However, the concern is not whether it is effective or not, but whether it has cost effectiveness, whether spending so much of money to do ECG in all athletes is worth in terms of lives saved. That is the question. So it is still open for argument. So what is the recommended screening program or screening pattern? We should take a family and a personal history. Physical examination is a must, and 12-lead ECG is optional or still being discussed. If all these are negative, he is eligible for competition. But if there are any positive findings, then further examination in the form of echo, a stress test, 24-hour Holter monitoring, MRI may be warranted. And if these clear the person, then he can again be recommended for athletic activity. If there is a diagnosis made of a cardiovascular disease, then the management is according to the guidelines. What are these guidelines? There are two basic guidelines. One is the Bethesda conference, which was held in 2005, which made a consensus statement for patients who have established heart disease with what kind of athletic activity they can perform. The other is the European Society of Cardiology document. I will just go through some of the cardiac conditions which are common, which are important. One is hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Anyone who has been diagnosed as having hypertrophic cardiomyopathy should not be allowed to take part in any athletic activity. But what about the family members or gene carriers? The Bethesda conference says they are not precluded from participation in competitive sports, given that there has been thus far little or no evidence of adverse cardiac events in such individuals. But the European Society of Cardiology is more restrictive. They say all competitive sports should be excluded, even for gene carriers. Their hypothesis is that regular exercise training and competitive sports can play a role in triggering cellular mechanism, leading to an HCM phenotype. So people who are just genotype can become phenotype if they regularly exercise. That is their hypothesis, and therefore they do not recommend any athletic activity even for gene carriers of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. What about channelopathies? There is long QT syndrome, Brugada, and catecholaminergic polymorphic ventricular tachycardia. For Brugada syndrome and CPVT, both documents restrict participation. For long QT syndrome, again, the guideline says that the cutoff value for long QT is different from the normal people, and because athletes can have a long QT. So for them, they say that for males, the cutoff should be 0.47 seconds, and for females, it is 0.48 seconds. When the diagnosis is made, the recommendation is for restriction of athletic activity. Marfan syndrome, they should be clearly looked for aortic root dimension, and this should be done every 6 months among athletes. They say participation in low and moderate competitive sports is allowed if there is no aortic root dilatation, if there is no moderate to severe mitral regurgitation, and if there is no family history of dissection or sudden death. WPW syndrome patients, whoever who has been diagnosed as having WPW syndrome with symptoms should not be allowed to take part in athletic activity. But patients who are asymptomatic, the recommendation is for EP studies to assess the risk of developing atrial fibrillation or arrhythmias and then decide on that. Non-sustained ventricular tachycardias, this is a common thing that happens, and asymptomatic athletes with no structural heart disease can take part in athletic activity provided the non-sustained VT is short, less than 10 beats, and at a rate which is less than 150 beats per minute. And they also should be able to show suppression during exercise. Mitral valve prolapse can also be a cause for sudden cardiac death, and it has been associated with sudden cardiac death some time back, but the role of it causing sudden cardiac death is becoming less and less. But even for them, no competitive sports is allowed if there is unexplained syncope, if there is a family history of sudden death, or if there is complex supraventricular or ventricular arrhythmias, or long QT interval, or severe mitral regurgitation. If none of these are there, then they are allowed to take part in sports. There are certain contraindications to high intensity competitive sports, that is low left ventricular ejection fraction, exercise induced tachyarrhythmias, exercise induced hypotension, exercise ischemia, syncope, and moderate to severe valvular disease, and any prior embolic event. One of the important issues that has been forgotten or has not been highlighted in the past is the reporting of prodromal symptoms. It is said that many individuals with exercise-related cardiovascular events had prodromal symptoms that were ignored by the victims and their physicians. Therefore, they say they only tell them to the relatives, and very few sought medical attention. So it is important that the participants are aware of these prodromal symptoms, and the clinicians are aware that these can be the manifestation of underlying heart disease. So in one of the studies, the prodromal symptoms reported by 45 subjects within 1 week of their recovered sudden cardiac death were angina in 15, increasing fatigue, indigestion, excessive breathlessness, neck or ear pain, vague malaise, and upper respiratory tract infection, dizziness, and palpitation. One of the other ways we can prevent sudden cardiac death among athletes is preparing fitness personnel. The death rate may be reduced if the personnel and facilities involved with exercise activities were prepared to handle cardiac emergencies. If there is a cardiac arrest, VT or VF, they should be managed appropriately. The AHA has recommended that coaches and trainers attending high school and college athletes be trained in cardiopulmonary resuscitation. The American Heart Association and the American College of Sports Medicine recommend that participants in fitness facilities be screened for heart disease using a specially designed questionnaire, and the facility staff be trained in managing cardiovascular emergencies. And they have also encouraged these fitness facilities to have automated defibrillators, so that if there is a cardiac arrest, there are facilities to defibrillate. So in summary, in athletes older than 35 years of age, 80% of sudden cardiac death is due to atherosclerotic coronary artery disease. The reported prevalence of hypertrophic cardiomyopathy in general public is only 0.2, and among athletes it's even less, 0.07 to 0.08. And what is important is that more than 90% of these affected individuals will have an abnormal resting ECG, and ECG plays an important role in identifying these high-risk patients. Congenital coronary anomalies are an important cause of sudden cardiac death in young patients, causing sudden cardiac death in 12 to 13% of patients. And surgical intervention is almost always recommended for anomalous left coronary artery arising from the right sinus. But for the right coronary sinus arising from the left coronary sinus, still the verdict is open. The other potential causes of sudden cardiac death with characteristic ECG findings include ARVC and Brugada syndrome. And in patients with Wolff-Parkinson syndrome, determining the electrical properties of the accessory pathway is important in establishing the risk of sudden cardiac death. And if the pathway is supposed to be high-risk pathway, then they need a radiofrequency ablation prior to taking part in athletic activity. Myocarditis is not uncommon as a cause of sudden cardiac death, accounting to up to about 5 to 10%. And pre-participation screening may play an important role in the identification of athletes at risk. While a screening protocol assessing symptoms, family history, and physical examination is nearly uniformly recommended, the use of ECG is still controversial. Thank you.